Hey gang, we're in here. Welcome on back to the Cade and another episode of Suckerpunch Sunday, our 90th in this series since we started. And we take a deep dive into a classic fighting or fighting platform-based game from the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th generation. And for this week, we're going to go back exactly 30 years to 1995, the glory days of the 16-bit era. And we're going to take on a game that was available for both the Super Nintendo and the Genesis. We're going to play the Genesis version, and I'll get to why in a minute. But it was created by Namco along with Visual Concepts, and it is considered by some to be the progenitor for what ended up being a very successful 3D fighting game series you may have heard of, called SoulCalibur. We're going to play Weaponlord. Now, the lore around this game is a little bit convoluted, to say the least. So I will try and explain it thusly as this storyline is being played out, at least on the preamble to the game. So on a battlefield where a demon enters the body of a dying mercenary, he's reborn and defeats 20 rulers in bloody combat. He goes on to found the reign of the Demon Lord Wraith, R-A-I-T-H. At the height of his power, his doom is foretold by a shaman. When the night turns violent and the moon bleeds, gripped by the skeletal fingers of death, a child will rise to face the demon in combat, and the lords of the demon will fall by the hands of the Weaponlord. Bum, bum, bum. Against the advice of his lieutenants to kill the children born that night, the Demon Lord waits to face his foretold killer in fair one-on-one combat. Years later, the demon Zarak overthrows Wraith and becomes the new Demon Lord. 25 years after that, Zarak holds a great tournament of champion warriors. The winner will face the demon in a final battle. The Demon Lord prepares to meet his destiny head-on and to destroy the Weaponlord. Okay. Now, this is a game I have never played. And the fact that it's one that I wanted to try out, given my affinity for all things Soul Edge / SoulCalibur, you would think it would have been one I would have tried by now. But instead, it was one of the many 16-bit era games that completely passed me by. It wasn't one that I ever recall seeing in my local game shop. It wasn't one I saw at my local video rental shop. And even if it was, being a one-on-one fighting game, it wasn't something that I would have been able to really play that often with my friends or other people. The interesting thing about this game is that it is, while it is a 2D fighting game, it is predicated on having things that were later incorporated into stuff in Street Fighter 3, Samurai Showdown, SoulCalibur, stuff like that, in that you could have the ability to parry, you can do deflect moves, you have various special moves you can do, either through combination of joystick and button. You can do charge moves, kind of like M. Bison in Street Fighter 2, and apparently each fighter has between 9 and 12 special moves each. And apparently they have what are called death combos. You may know them more conveniently as fatalities if you're a Mortal Kombat person. So I'm going to try and just take on this game starting out as Kor, K-O-R-R. He's the future leader of the Tarok, leaves his tribe to find himself. He is still haunted by the vision of his brother, who was taken in a raid 7 years ago. Kor is now focused. The years of training, natural ability, and passion come together. Reaches the finals unscathed. Now he will face the final 5 challengers for the right to meet the demon. So it looks like we start out in the Outlands. And we're going to fight Devada, Battleground Evil Sands. Now this is a game you can play with your joystick. Being the Genesis, you will have 3 buttons available, A, B, and C. There's not much you can do otherwise than that. So your A button is your primary light attack, your B is your medium thrust attack, and C is your heavy attack. And Divida tends to want to try and turn into a ball and float around here. And she's got that double-headed spear of hers. But we're doing well at the moment. Keeping her in range with our two-handed barbarian sword. And the uppercut, we put her down. Now, this game was designed by two guys, James Goddard and Dave Winston, who previously worked for Capcom. Goddard was the co-designer and U.S. producer for the Champion Edition of Street Fighter II. So his pedigree was pretty strong at that point by 1995. He designed the character of DJ for Super Street Fighter II. And Winstead had worked on Super Street Fighter II Turbo. So you would think that these two guys, going from Capcom to Namco, would have a pretty good idea of how to design a fighting game. I just got nailed the 2-hit combo and then the kick flip. Ooh, and now Devada's going to town on me. Oof, and I've been put down. The decision to make this a weapons-based game apparently stemmed from James Goddard's interest and his longtime fascination with the Conan the Barbarian series created by the late Robert E. Howard back in the 1920s. And if you are familiar with the Conan the Barbarian films of Arnold Schwarzenegger and Jason Momoa, you probably have a good idea of what I'm on about. Meanwhile, she's dicing me to... Oh my god! I got absolutely carved up there. Now, Visual Concepts, the company that worked with Namco to build this, apparently had an incredibly tight schedule to complete the game. The decision to add a Genesis version came later on in the development cycle. It was originally going to only be for the Super Nintendo. Now, the reason why I'm playing the Genesis version as opposed to the Super Nintendo version is the version that I got to try and play on the SNES was broken. Again, it goes in part to how I play test all my games before I record the episodes, because I want to make sure the game works. Oof. I've been taken down again. But when I did my playtest run on the Super Nintendo version, 1, it had no sound. And 2, I lost the first fight, but then the timer kept going. It was not set to infinite time like this game is. And I could not get it to advance. Reset it, tried it again, couldn't get it to work. So, in looking at the reviews for the game, I've been absolutely poleaxed by Nevada again, which means I'm going to have to try a different character. Whoops, not what I wanted to do. Alright, we'll try one more time here. There we go. So you have to make sure you are not entirely going by your heavy attack. You do have to change it up a bit. Oh my god, she was dead. She was dead, and I could not hit her once. That's annoying. All right. Nope, could not put me in any worse position, and she cut me to shribbins again. So I'm going to let this run down. And while I do that, as I pick out a different character, Old Game Magazine, when they reviewed this back in 1995, gave both versions a 4.5 out of 5 stars, but EGM only gave the Genesis version a 5.6 out of 10. Next Generation Magazine gave both versions a 4 out of 5 stars. EGM, when they reviewed it, the 4 reviewers, I guess, who made up the column on it were divided. 2 panned the game for the choppy animation and poor control, 1 concluding the concepts are there, but the game just isn't. The other 2 also heavily criticized the animation and control, but argued the gamers would feel the innovative fighting techniques make the game worthwhile in spite of its flaws. When Next Generation did their review of it, they criticized the choppy animation, but greatly praised the innovative and deep weapons combat, and concluded the game was worthy of at least a good long look. GamePro complimented the graphics, sound effects, and variety of moves. They criticized the limited number of playable characters, but concluded while the advanced gameplay may scare away beginning barbarians, others will appreciate the deep controls. So apparently the Super NES version, the countering system is a little bit easier to pull off than the Genesis version. Which means I may have to go back and do something similar to what I did with Aladdin and try out both versions if I can find a working version of the Super Nintendo Weaponlord, as opposed to going strictly by the Genesis version. Unfortunately, this game was not a large commercial success. I don't know how many units it ultimately sold, but James Goddard, who again was one of the co-designers, attributed it to being released at the tail end of the 16-bit console era, even though at the time, the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis were still dominating the market. The 1995 was right around the time the PlayStation 1 was just about to hit. Oh, she got me with a damn flip again. So trying to jump forward is a bit of a bear, because that's what I was trying to do. And Devada here can hit me with all the heavy attacks she wants, but I can barely respond with a heavy attack of my own. And my reach is such where I'm not hitting her. And then she clips my ankles out and that's it. There's a little bit of a gratuitous fan shot for you.
Battle 2.
So her being able to turn into a ball and transport like that, I don't know if that's something that we can all do, but if so, I have yet to figure out how. And then that little magic flare of hers. Then I went to attack again and still nothing happened. Alright, so it looks like I need to try somebody else here. But this game came out a year before Bandai Namco released Soul Edge. Soul Edge came out in arcades February 20th, 1996. Again, this game was released in 1995. Let me see if I can find a character that I can work with here. All right, here we go. All right, who else do we have? We have try Talazia here. Okay, so looks like as I'm checking GameFAQ here to pull up a control list, it's Talazia versus Core, so now we can see what Core can do. And we get to fight somebody other than Devada.
Battle 1.
And Core has a flaming sword that I knew nothing about. Wow, and he is absolutely mincing us up. That took no time at all.
Battle 2.
So, there's moves that I can pull here, but they involve things like charging away from the enemy, going down, going back away from the enemy. And it seems like the ability to pull special moves off is way more convoluted than it needs to be, as I get completely skewered again. So to give you an idea, like if I wanted to pull off a move that Talazia had called the Talon Blade, you go away from the enemy, down, away from the enemy, and then push Y or Z, which in my case would have been B or C. And to go away, down, away, is that either, I would either have to go, are they asking like a fireball, or are they saying to do that and hold it? Whereas you can do stuff like the Rip Claw, and that's hold B or C, then go away, angle down, down. Yeah, crouch away from enemy and go towards enemy. So the ability to do combinations in this game seems way more complicated than it needs to be. So, like, to do that Firestorm attack that Core just did with his sword, it's hold B or C and then go up, jump towards the enemy, and then down. Who would think that that's a viable sort of deal? Then if I want to do something like an elbow smash, it would be tap towards plus B and or C. This is the one thing that has always bothered me about, that's right, this guy, Bane, the Lone Wolf, about most fighting games, is that if you overly complicate the ability to pull out special moves, then where's the fun in it? So, for instance, if I want to be able to pull off, he's got a move called the Power Hammer. If it's away from the enemy, away, down, down, and then B or C. So it seems like I gotta do a quarter turn down. And if I want to do that power flip that Devada does, that one right there, it is hold wire Z, go up.
Nevada win.
Yeah, you have to go up, jump, and then down. Why would you need to jump to be able to pull off a throw? That makes no sense at all. Now, we played SoulCalibur 1, also known as the original Soul Edge, way back in episode 2 of this series. And I said at the time, and I'll say it again for the record, I love Soul Edge. The Soul Edge SoulCalibur series was a real great breath of fresh air into the 3D gaming market in the mid to late 90s. I will never speak ill about that game. I spent as much time playing that game in a cabinet in my local arcade, and then when it came out on consoles, it's just about every other game I had available to me at the time. Because it was the closest thing I could get to a three-dimensional Samurai Showdown.
Nevada win.
But if this is meant to be the progenitor for that, Namco really whiffed on this. So let's try one more time. We'll pick one more player to go with. All right, we'll try Zorn. He's the only other character that we haven't really tried yet. This is Zorn the Defiler. So he's got a shield and an axe. And we're going to face Core. And his stuff is like, yeah, hold wired Z, go towards an enemy, up and towards an enemy. So, for stuff like the Scream Shield.
Battle one.
Because basic moves in this game are not sufficient when your opponent has the ability to pull out every possible special move they want to be able to use against you. And I'm not surprised that Core has that Conan stance. And now that he's got me close to death, he's definitely coming at me with everything. And that 3-hack flaming sword, strike the pose.
Battle two.
Wow, and he can even swing behind him and hit me. And the amount of damage he's doing compared to what I'm doing to him is nuts. And just like that, I am toast. And we're at 25 minutes, so I might as well call it good there. But that, everybody, in a nutshell, is Weaponlord for the Super Nintendo / Sega Genesis from 1995. Question 1. Is this a good game? I'm really inclined to say no, because it is way more complicated than it needs to be. I will put in the show notes down below the link to GameFAQ where you can go and look up how these guys operate. If you can decipher how this works and convey what is required to be able to pull even a basic special move off with this sort of stuff, I'd love to know. I really would. Because that, to me, is what makes the game infinitely less enjoyable. You would think that two guys who worked on the greatest fighting game ever created, Street Fighter II, would do their best not to overly complicate the means by which a player can execute basic special moves. Somehow, these two guys, Goddard and Winstead, managed to do that to a degree that I, for the life of me, could not tell you how to get the majority of stuff done. When you're having to sit there and think of, okay, I have to go away from the enemy, go towards the enemy, press Y or Z, make sure that I am jumping or I'm not jumping, or I'm jumping away from an enemy or towards an enemy, or I'm crouching away from an enemy or I'm going towards it. All that stuff you don't have time to think about in a fighting game. It's, do I do quarter turn up for a fireball, or do I do half spin back for a hurricane kick? That is the intuitive nature of what goes into making a great fighting game. Again, Street Fighter II exemplified that. They absolutely perfected the formula for that, and every great fighting game that's come out in that vein ever since has followed along a similar line. They didn't reinvent the wheel, they did certain things with it, but again, if you look at what they did with SoulCalibur / Soul Edge, Namco came up with a really good way to do that in a 3D environment. Forget about a 2D environment. So we think the big issue here is that it is just way overly complicated, and it doesn't need to be. If they had simplified the controls, you would have a much better game. But then again, I also understand where it is that the critics of this game were coming from in saying you have to be somebody who is going to get really, really into the finer details of how this game works to get any enjoyment out of it. Is this a game they could make today? Yeah, they probably could. If, again, as they have hypothesized, this is the forerunner to Soul Edge / SoulCalibur, then that's already been done. Could they go back and update this for a modern audience? I don't see why not. But again, they would have to completely overhaul the mechanics of it and make the ability for the players to pull off the moves that the CPU can do ad nauseum without any degree of effort at all, because it's already baked in to its protocol. That would take a lot more time and energy, I think, than anybody would really want to dedicate to it. Which is a shame, because there's a potential here for a pretty good fighting game. I think I see where they were going with it, and the idea of going with that Hyborian age sword and sorcery fantastical atmosphere and what they wanted to do, that's kind of up my street. That's a game that I would take time and energy to want to get more in the weeds on. Again, I'm playing at the moment, I'm about 2/3 of the way through the first Berserker Kazan, and that game does have its issues in terms of its mechanics and its controls, but it gets enough right that it allows you to do a lot of the work in programming what you want. So when you're in a boss situation, you have the means by which you can use the skills available to you to bring an enemy or a boss down. And it's not super complicated. It's a 2-button combination. They could have done that here, but they just, for whatever reason, opted not to. So, can I recommend you try it? If you want. If you've never tried it before, give it a go. Again, you can play it either on the Super Nintendo, if you have a Super NES emulator or a Genesis emulator. I'm using the Fusion 3.64 Genesis emulator for this version. I was using ZSNES for the Super Nintendo version. Again, the Super Nintendo version that I had was not fully functional, so if you want to give it a crack on that console, your results may vary. However, that is Suckerpunch Sunday for this week. Thank you very much for stopping by and tuning in. If you've been enjoying the content on the channel, you know how to do that by now. Also, hope you enjoyed Sports Saturday yesterday. Again, apologies for getting that up a little bit late. Mother Nature decided we're at the time of the year where she's going to drop a massive pollen bomb on me, and I'm still feeling a little bit of it, but fortunately I've recovered enough that I can get these recorded and not spend every other second sneezing or trying my best not to have my sinuses plug up. Normal service will continue to be restored through the week. On that front, we will have our one-day playthroughs coming back starting tomorrow. They're pretty straightforward. They're a game you can play in an hour or you can play them in a full day. But they're older games that most people of this generation probably don't know much about. And they're ones that I like to be able to highlight. We are also having the comeback of WTF Wednesday, of which we've already had 2 episodes in the can. And those are episodes where we take a look at games that on paper seem like a good idea, but in reality, not so much. Of course, if you go back and look through it, you're going to see Balatro sitting there from the first week of April. That was our April Fool's joke. Tongue planted firmly in cheek for that one. But we decided to have a little bit of fun with a game that we otherwise spend way too much time around the shop playing when we're not recording new content. Be sure to follow us on social media through Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky. Ronan's Retrocade helps spread the word about us as we continue to build this channel, make it bigger and better. My name is Ronan. It's been great to spend this Suckerpunch Sunday with you. Be safe, be well, happy gaming. Enjoy the springtime if you can. It's been gorgeous weather out here, pollen bomb aside. Take full advantage of it, because now it's getting to the better time of the year. And we'll talk to you tomorrow for our first episode in a while of a one-day playthrough. Bye.